Hey guys, it's me, Justin. It's been a while since I've been doing these reviews, and I know it's been a while since I've meant to get around to this, but I finally got a chance to go see the Hunger Games Mockingjay Part One with my girlfriend Lauren, and we meant to do that. We meant to go see it a couple weeks ago when it first came out, but some things came up, and we didn't really have time to get together to go watch it. So we went and seen it a couple of days ago, and I might as well talk about how I feel about the first two movies. I really enjoyed the first Hunger Games. I thought it was a good movie about how pretty much how our government would eventually be in the future, where it's like they have these different classes. They have the rich and they have the lower class people, and they divide them all into these different populations, these different districts, and they're forced to put the basically the random selected people who are coming from those districts, and they put them in this game where they have to kill each other. And I thought that I like that kind of concept. I really like the idea of having people all come together in one, because I usually have those movies where you have one person who survives the game and then that's it, and you pretty much know what's going to happen. Well, I really got into the first movie a lot because it wasn't anything new, but it was good to see a different view on how they take the society. And I feel like the Hunger Games, the first one, made a lot of impact with a lot of movies that later came out, because they try to blend in, they tried to capitalize on that kind of concept where you have different classes who are so different from apart, and they don't work together, and so there's something that causes these people from these different classes to compete with each other, or they try to revolt against the higher government and spread pretty much anarchy. And that's pretty much what happens with well, I'm not going to spoil it for those who haven't seen it, but the first Hunger Games I really enjoyed because it was a great take on how we look at reality television, how our government is, and all the classes of people are so scarce and so really bad, and just it's just a really bad it's just a bad way to live. But what really got me attention the most was the performances by with Jennifer Lawrence, because to me, from that movie, she's becoming a great superstar. She's been making a lot of great movies that I've watched and I've really enjoyed seeing, especially in American Hustle, Silver Linings Playbook, and then you also got the other Hunger Games movies that come out, and even as Mystique in the X-Men First Class movies. But yeah, but the only thing that really drew my attention off of the first Hunger Games was that I didn't like a lot of the shaky cam, because every time the battle scenes would come up, there would be a lot of parts where it's just all jumbly and you can't see what's happening. I get why they did that, was because the books themselves are hardcore. They're meant for a young adult audience, and I guess they were wanting to make it as a hard R, but they couldn't get to it. They couldn't make it because they wanted to appeal to everybody, so they had to make it as a PG-13. I get why they did it, but if you're gonna go by the key themes of the book, you need to at least basically kind of put your right mindset with the audience. You don't you're you need to actually target the audience that you want to see for this film. And luckily with the second one, sorry, no, Catching Fire. Catching Fire really improved that a lot. I really loved Catching Fire. In fact, out of the ones they made so far, Catching Fire is my favorite. Because not only did it continue the story with Katniss Everdeen, played by Jennifer Lawrence, but it also made the stakes feel a lot more higher. Where her and these other victors who had survived, they base or her and Peta who had survived, they pretty much have to live with what they've got, because no matter what happens, their entire lives are being controlled by President Snow and the entire pretty much it becomes like a Nazi Germany. You know, they're forcing people to do all this stuff, and they're forcing them to basically be on camera and smile and do all that, and pretty much live their lives happily, while all the ones that are living in these lower class societies, they're trying to look up to them. They end up getting killed. It really makes it feel a lot more intense. It draws the emotion out of the story. It makes the characters a lot more well developed. And as the film goes on, you really start to realize that the movie is not just about the games. It's more about how these characters that you grow to love, they tend to try everything they can to not get anyone killed, but things always happen because this is a really shitty government. But yeah, that's really what I have with the first two films. I love Catching Fire, and I didn't want to just kind of continue with what I feel about Mockingjay. But yeah, excuse me, going into Mockingjay, I had really high hopes for this movie because it really made me feel like, okay, they're gonna go after him. They're gonna go after President Snow. They're gonna get PETA. They're actually gonna go to war. Well, that is true, but not to spoil anything. But here's pretty much what happens. That all comes into play in about probably the last hour or so, because the first hour of this film is Katniss and everyone. They're living in this underground facility that's now being run by, I forgot the character's name, but she's played by Julianne Moore. Julianne Moore is the Madam President who is having everyone work underground to hide from President Snow and all the other and from the Capitol. And so as the movie progresses, she becomes their Mockingjay to lead the rebellion against President Snow. But before she does that, she is taken with these other guys. Uh, excuse me. These other people who work in this film group, and they have to make all these different videos in order to get a message out to President Snow, and pretty much like try to break into their facility in order to get PETA out. And that all does come into play like as the movie progresses, but this movie is probably my least favorite of the Hunger Games series because it's kind of a bit of a drawback. Like, I like it, but at the same time, I have problems with it. It tends to have it structured in such a weird way. Like the first hour or so, there's barely anything going on. Like I'm not talking about just action and stuff like that. I mean like literally, there's barely anything going on with like the first hour. You have scenes where characters like Katniss and the other character, Gale, played by Liam Hemsworth, which I'm sorry, I really can't stand that guy. He's not a good actor. He's really not. He's the worst thing about these films that I can't stand. Out of all the acting in the films, like he's the one where I'm just like, you're about as charismatic as a brick of wood, you know. But also, they tend to have the characters a bit. They introduce some of these characters. I'm just like, well, they really didn't really have much to do with that person, so I really don't know why you brought him into the film. But you also have scenes where they tend to drag on with a lot of drama that happens, which I understand. They're trying to make it feel like the stakes are a lot more intense. They're trying to make emotion come out of it, and there are some scenes that do work here, but all that seems to get hammered in a lot of parts where you're just like, do we really need to have this go on? You know, get to the point. Look, I understand. I haven't read the book, so I can't judge the books by its. Well, they always say, never judge a book by its cover, or never judge a book unless you read it. So I can't go by what the books are because I'm sure that the books are like that, where it's like the first half of the page of the last book is like that, where it's all built up. But see, to me, what makes this film different from, say, something like Harry Potter and Deathly Hallows is that the Deathly Hallows book, from what I understand, and I know this is off topic, but I'm just saying, as far as context wise, where you have two movies that are split into two, or one book that's split into two movies, where it's the final book. I understand why Harry Potter did it, was because there was a lot of material to cover that ground, where more things were happening altogether to build up to what would eventually lead to the final showdown. But Mockingjay, it does that good, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, it feels kind of padded out. They tend to have a lot of scenes that either you could have either cut out, or you could have either made either a punchline or something, because there seems to be a lot too much drama, you know, and that's not a bad thing. I like drama in films. It's just it feels, how do I put it? You know how you have those movies where you're trying to get the emotion out of it, but they keep basically kind of repeating some of the same things they usually say, or they kind of do some things that are where you pretty much understand why they did it. It's one of those. I know I might not be making sense much of it, but I don't know. I just thought that as far as structure wise, they could have done more with as far as the story. I mean, as far as the actual build up to what eventually will be in part two, which we'll get next year. But overall, I didn't mind Mockingjay. I thought it was a fine movie. It's just that it's still flawed. And plus some of the action parts for what little they have, they're okay, but they still feel like they feel choppy in a lot of parts. You remember how in Mockingjay where you had those great shots of like the arrows flying, you had the action was a lot more fluent. This one they kind of went back to more of the kind of the shaky cam from the first one, but not a little bit, not too much, but just a little bit, kind of like that. It was kind of distracting. It was distracting in some parts, and I don't know. They didn't really do much with some of the characters that we know and to grow on, like like PETA. Well, actually, no. I take it back. They do some things that are pretty creative that are for the end. Like you see Hamish, he becomes sober, and you see Effrey, or what's her name? I forgot the one girl, but you see her without like her makeup and all that, and you see some things that change here and there. But I mean, I like the film okay, but it's just not. It's just not. It's probably my least favorite of the three. But I can't really judge the whole movie because it's only the first part. So we'll get to part two. When we get to part two, I'll judge the movie as a whole. So that way, when it finally gets here, I can pretty much judge just that movie as its own compared to the other first two movies. But yeah, that's really all I've got. I mean, I do recommend the film. Don't get me wrong, and I'm sure that fans of the book will probably go like it too. I mean, I'm not sure how different it is from the book, but for what it was, it's a good movie. But don't expect catching fire material out of this. You just gotta look at it as its own kind of thing, and just go from there. Just let me hear you guys' thoughts and what you think about it. Excuse me. But yeah, I'd say go check out Catching Fire because I will say that when he gets to about the last hour, it does pick up and it does start to get better because there is something that I didn't see coming in the film that I was just like, wow, they really got me here. And it's interesting when they finally do lead up to part two, and it's really interesting what happens, and it's pretty intense too. So that's really all I got. There's more I want to talk about with the movie, but that's really much I have. And rest in peace, Philip Seymour Hoffman. He's in the film majority of the time, and I understand that they had to use some CGI and like some like body shots or body doubles in some scenes, but I barely noticed. So he pretty much like completed a majority of scenes, and like for the rest of it, he basically pulled a Brandon Lee, where he finished most of it, but they had to come in for like pickup shots from him to do with like other effects. But he did a great job for his last movie, and I thought that he went well with a good role like that. So that's really all I got. Check out Hunger Games, catch Mockingjay Part One, and I'll just see you guys in my next review, which will be talking about Nightcrawler. So see you.